I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
I was kind of scared. I thought Detroit was going to take me. I would ask for so much money that I had to put me on layaway.
Welcome to episode 16. So today we're going to go into the recent NFL arrests, and then later on we're going to do our top 5 multi-sport athletes. So for first on the slate, we're going to do the NFL arrests. So I think it was 2 weeks ago, Earl Thomas got arrested, which, I mean, it's not really much of a shock. I think like one major kind of incident happens per offseason, but then I think like the players got together and they're like, let's have our own like purge. Let's just like break every law. So recently we had 4 NFL players get arrested within 3 days. 14 plus charges, several felonies. And so we had Ed Oliver, which was the most recent one. We had Cody Latimer, and then we had the major one, which was Deandre Baker and Quentin Dunbar. It's just crazy that these NFL players are getting cooped up, and then they're just going insane.
Yeah, you'd think with quarantine, they're supposed to stay in their house. As an NFL GM, knowing some of these players didn't grow up in the greatest backgrounds and they got into trouble as a kid and as a college student, you'd think quarantine was a blessing in disguise. Oh, now these guys can't get out of their houses. But I guess the opposite's true. I don't think I've ever seen this much news about NFL players getting arrested. Even earlier in the offseason, Quinn Williams got arrested at LaGuardia Airport as well, so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through some of the like what happened for each arrest.
Yeah.
The recent one, Ed Oliver, he got arrested for driving intoxicated and then also unlawfully carrying a weapon. There was some speculation whether he was on some other substances like drugs, but the cop pulled him over. He had a can of beer between his legs. This is pretty big news because his rookie year was last year. He was the 9th overall pick. So you think some guys would their first couple of years try to be as cool and calm as collected, being a young star, but he did not hesitate.
Yeah, no, I know he's a player that the Giants and Giants fans really wanted them to draft, along with Jonathan Allen, over their quarterback that they did end up picking in Daniel Jones. But, I mean, this news is not good. And also his first-round pick counterpart, Quinnen Williams, for the Jets also got arrested for a similar incident with possession of a firearm.
Yeah, and then we had Cody Latimer, the wide receiver from the Redskins. He was charged with assault in second-degree, illegal discharge of a firearm, and also prohibited the use of a weapon. So I think there's a lot of unclear details about his arrest more than the other ones. I think there was some sort of party going on in an apartment in Colorado, and some sort of shots were fired. I don't think anyone was shot by the gun, but it might have been just like a warning shot.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty crazy. And then the big one, we got Deandre Baker and Quentin Dunbar. They just recently turned themselves in, but they were at a party or some sort of barbecue, and they held the party up with weapons. I think it was heavy weaponry, too. I don't even think they were just
semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah, they held the party up. They took everybody's watches. They stole thousands of dollars, and they had getaway cars set up, apparently, for them to – so they have, like, their own freaking – Ocean's 11 heist going on right here.
Yeah, and apparently, I mean, it's like a GTA 5 heist where I guess all the getaway cars were Lamborghinis and Porsches too. So if you're trying to get away, I feel like it would be better to drive a low-key car, a kind of car that wouldn't stand out. But if you're ripping down the street with a Lamborghini, I mean, that's pretty badass if I would say so myself. But they stole 4 watches. I think it's really funny that they stole a Rolex, which was valued at $18K, and then some other watches valued at $25K, a watch valued at $17.5K. Then they actually ended up stealing somebody's watch, which was later found out to be fake and only valued at $600. So it's kind of a silent victory for the man who is flexing a fake watch.
He didn't want to tell him. They were probably like taking it off his wrist, and he's like, guys, I gotta tell you something.
I don't think you want this watch.
Yeah, but with these arrests, I mean, also the Earl Thomas one, almost dying because his wife was in the chamber. Just really weird story, him having some sort of orgy with his brother. I mean, that's the craziest story I think out of all of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess we just certainly were not expecting this out of Earl Thomas, but I absolutely love the memes that are really coming out about Earl Thomas and his brother. Even Colin Cowherd took a shot at Earl Thomas, which was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. I think the weirdest thing out of the Earl Thomas thing is when he posted a thing on Instagram and he was just like, "It is what it is. Life goes on." Like he just did not like care at all. He was not worried at all what was
Yeah,
gonna happen
it's
to him.
like, please, nobody ask us questions. And right when you saw that, and that's before the news broke, so I guess he knew it was about to break. And then, of course, everybody flooded him with questions. I don't know what he really expected to happen out of that situation.
Yeah, but in light of these arrests, if you can make an, I mean, they're kind of funny, honestly. But
Yeah,
the prison, the NFL all prison teams kind of getting some depth on their roster. Like
yeah, for
Vic is
sure.
gonna have some weapons with Cody Latimer now.
For
The
sure.
defense
I mean,
needs some help too.
yeah, they already have some great players on there. I mean, you can even say maybe Ray Lewis is on there. That's debatable, but some great players on that all jail defense for sure.
Yeah. Maybe I mean, could you even categorize Antonio Brown on there? I feel like he's on the brink of.
He will be in the next year, so that much I could say. If he's not right now, he already has been. I mean, I know he's had some run-in with the cops recently. Most recently, I think his wife was trying to take his car and also his kids, and I know he got into a dispute over that. I know he later apologized, but yeah, I mean, Antonio Brown, he's already out of the NFL as of right now, but even with the police, he's on thin ice.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's sad. You have a lot of young talent here with Ed Oliver and DeAndre Baker, and it's kind of just sad to see them make mistakes like this. Hopefully, they can shape up and get back in the league.
Certainly.
Because Ed Oliver, I mean, he was a ninth overall pick. He had 43 tackles last year, 5 sacks. So I think a high impact player already.
Yeah, and that's all right. And that's even as a nose tackle, so you don't expect those guys to get that sack number their rookie year. So, I mean, he was really good coming out of college. So, yeah, that's definitely disappointing to see that out of him.
Yeah. And also, I mean, DeAndre Baker coming out of Georgia, he lined up against a lot of talented wide receivers in the SEC. So, I mean, I don't know if much of that translated to the NFL, but hopefully in the future he can get better too.
Yeah, and according to multiple reports, apparently he was trying to pay off a gambling debt. I guess him and Quentin Dunbar were gambling at high stakes tables and they lost a very large sum of money. And I know they're making millions of dollars in the NFL, but I guess their mindset was if we can make this money back real quick, pay off these debts, and keep gambling, then we can win even more money. So I guess that robbery was just over some gambling debt money that they were trying to gain back. So
Yeah, I mean, even if you have gambling debt, your NFL players, I think you can easily pay that back.
yeah,
And also, your NFL players, there's no way you're gonna get away with it. Like the odds of you getting away with this robbery are very slim.
yeah, exactly. Even if, I mean, we even saw incidences where Ezekiel Elliott was never criminally charged with anything and he never ended up getting legally in trouble, but he still ended up getting suspended 6 games by the NFL. So even if you get into some trouble off the field and you don't get into legal trouble, the NFL still conducts their independent investigation and they will still punish you and take away your salary, games, and could even ban you from the NFL. So,
Yeah. So, moving on to our next topic, we're gonna do the top 5 multi-sport athletes full time. So, I was listening to a podcast, and they were interviewing Joe Burrow, and they're talking about how Joe Burrow was talking about how he was recruited for some basketball schools out of high school. So he said he was considering going to a smaller school and playing both football and basketball.
mm,
So, and also going along with that, in the Last Dance, the last couple episodes, they talked about Michael Jordan's baseball career. So it just got me thinking, who are the best athletes that were able to play multiple sports at the highest level and not just kind
yeah.
of good in high school or good in the minor leagues like Michael Jordan was. So let's get right into it. You want to go first for your? We'll go 5-1. So you want to go first with your fifth guy?
So 5-1, this list, I mean, there's such great athletes of all time. Like you said, I mean, if you're a great athlete at the one sport you play professionally, chances are you're going to be great at so many other sports. I mean, we saw even recently Henry Ruggs playing pickup basketball games, being a phenomenal athlete, just dunking, jumping out of the court. So, I mean, usually if you're a great athlete at one sport, you're going to be a great athlete at multiple sports. But for this list, I personally really just tried to hone in on athletes who not only were great at one sport professionally, but great at two sports professionally. So at my number 5 spot, I'm going to put arguably the greatest athlete in human history, and that is Bo Jackson. He's the only professional athlete in history to be an all-star at both MLB baseball and NFL football. He was most notably a running back for the Raiders, and he was an outfielder for the Royals. He allegedly had the best 40-yard dash time of all time at 4.12 seconds, which is absolutely insane. Also, considering he was 6'1", he weighed 220 pounds, so it wasn't like he was just a skinny track guy running an insane all-time record at a 40-yard dash time. He was a big guy who could also just run through people in the NFL. He was an absolute animal. He was the first pick in the NFL draft. He also ran track in high school and college, but he was amazing at Auburn. He won the Heisman in 1985. And the reason I knocked him and put him at the number 5 spot and not even the number 1 spot, as you can argue he is that he had such a short career in the NFL and he had such a short career in the MLB. He always says, looking back on his professional athlete career, he really just should have stuck to baseball because he thought he would have had a longer career. But I mean, injuries really just derailed his professional athletic career in the MLB and the NFL. I was really surprised to know he never ran for over 1,000 yards in an NFL season, and he only played 4 seasons in the NFL. And his highest number of games played in those NFL seasons were 11 games. So, I mean, he really is one of the biggest what ifs in sports history. I think he's the only player you could say out of any player of all time who could have been a Hall of Famer at both sports if he really honed in on one sport. So, really sad story with Bo Jackson, but I still have to give him a nod at number 5.
Yeah, I won't go too much into Bo Jackson. I had him higher on my list, but it's just really, really sad to see someone of that athletic caliber to be riddled with, or not riddled with injury. He had a freak hip injury, kind of
Yeah.
similar to his injury, but it's just sad to see someone with that major injury having to retire, and we just never saw a glimpse of what he can really do. Before I get into my 5th spot, I just want to give some honorable mentions. Charlie Ward and Danny Ainge. Charlie Ward won the Heisman Trophy and national championship at Florida State, and he also played basketball. He was able to help lead the Seminoles to a Sweet 16 and Elite 8. Unfortunately, he wasn't drafted in the NFL, but he was drafted in the first round in the NBA and helped lead the Knicks to the 1999 NBA Finals. And then Danny Ainge, he was an All-American in football, baseball, and basketball. He was drafted right out of high school by the Blue Jays, but decided to enroll at BYU for basketball. And then while he was at BYU, he won Player of the Year his senior year, and then he was also on the Blue Jays while he was in college. So somehow he was able to be a Major League Baseball player while also being a high caliber basketball player. And then later on, he won 2 championships with the Celtics. So with my 5th best multi-sport athlete of all time, I had the great Jim Brown. So in high school, he played football, basketball, lacrosse, and he ran track and field. Apparently, he averaged 38 points in high school for basketball. But, I mean, it's just basketball, so obviously a high-caliber athlete like him is able to perform well against some lesser competition. But I think what he did at Syracuse really shows how good he really was. He was an All-American in football. He was an All-American in lacrosse. He won Player of the Year his senior year for lacrosse. I mean, some of his numbers are just outstanding. He was selected in the first round by the Browns in 1957. When he retired, he owned a lot of the all-time rushing records and single-season records for the time being. Obviously, they were in shorter seasons, so a lot of those records were broken later on. I think just the most astonishing fact of Jim Brown is he's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the only players or athletes of all time to be a Hall of Famer in football and in lacrosse, which is a pretty incredible feat. So he was able to perform at the actual highest level for both sports, and some even consider him the best lacrosse player of all time.
Yeah, I have Jim Brown a little higher on my list, but Jim Brown, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, in his senior season playing lacrosse, he scored 43 goals in 10 games. I mean, that's absolutely insane. And that led him to be the second best scorer in the nation that year. So, I mean, Jim Brown, absolutely fantastic. And going back to one of your honorable mentions in Danny Ainge, not only is he a great athlete, which is just amazing, but he's also a great just mind. I mean, he's one of the best general managers that the NBA has today. I mean, year in and year out for the last decade, he's been probably the most integral part of that great Celtics front office. So,
Yeah.
but getting into my number 4 spot, I'm going to have primetime Deion Sanders as my 4th greatest multi-sport athlete of all time. I mean, he's most notably the greatest man-to-man lockdown corner in NFL history, pretty undisputably. In 1989, he became the only person ever to hit a home run and score a touchdown in the same week, which is absolutely insane. That record, I don't think, will ever be broken. I mean, even considering he played defensive back and he scored a touchdown and hit a home run in the same week, I mean, that's insane. For a running back to do it, it's one thing, but for a defensive player to do it, it's a whole other thing. I mean, that's a incredible feat. I mean, he played most notably for the Falcons, the Cowboys, and the 49ers, played for some other teams, but really was kind of past his prime with those other teams. But he played baseball for the Atlanta Braves and New York Yankees. But on the Braves, most notably, he had a .533 batting average in the World Series when he played against the Blue Jays. I mean, he was an All-American football player in college, and he's another athlete with just an incredible 40 time. He ran a 4.27, so just blazing speed. That's Henry Ruggs speed. And I mean, in his NFL career, he had 9 return touchdowns, 10 defensive touchdowns. So not only is he one of the best cornerbacks of all time, he's one of the best return men of all time. Just a great multi-sport athlete. I know he wasn't a phenomenal baseball player, but he was a professional baseball player. I know he was a threat to steal a base every time he was on first base. Just so explosive, and he was no joke in the MLB. Whenever he was in the lineup, you had to pay attention to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's just pure athleticism, pure speed. He's just truly gifted to be able to perform. At Florida State, he played football, baseball, and track and field, so he was just able to compete the highest level and even excel for football and baseball in the major leagues, and it's just so incredible.
Yep.
So for my number 4 spot, I had the great Jackie Robinson. In high school, he played baseball, football, basketball, track and field, and tennis.
Wow.
In 1936, he won the tennis boys single championship, which is great. And then the craziest stat is he's UCLA's only 4 varsity sport athlete of all ever. So he played baseball, basketball, football, and track. He ran track at UCLA. In 1940, he won the NCAA men's long jump. I believe it was 24 feet, which is insane. In football, one year he led the Bruins in passing, rushing, and scoring 36 points. He bounced around some semi-pro football leagues, so he didn't get quite to the NFL. The NFL was pretty young after the years he was in college, but his football career was kind of cut short because he had to go to the World War II. He had to serve for World War II, but most notably, Jackie Robinson's career was amazing in baseball. He won the 1949 NL MVP. He was 6-time All-Star, and then he was a Baseball Hall of Famer in 1962. But I mean, his most notable thing is breaking the color barrier for baseball. But just looking at, he was able to perform in 4 varsity athletes. I mean, 4 varsity sports while he was at UCLA is just insane. He's just constantly training for these sports, and it's just being able to perform that high at UCLA at the time. UCLA was one of the best colleges. It's just insane to look at that.
Yeah, he's the most important person in American sports history. I mean, he's just to break the color barrier in the biggest sport at the time in baseball is just absolutely phenomenal. It's really just a shame that he wasn't able to enter the MLB right when he ended his incredible collegiate career, because he had some incredible seasons in his other league that he did play in that was not the MLB. So Jackie Robinson, absolute fantastic athlete. I mean, he was blazing fast. He really was known for stealing bases as well for those Dodgers teams. So really can't go wrong with
Yeah.
Jackie Robinson there.
And I think the craziest thing looking at Jackie Robinson at UCLA, baseball was actually his worst sport.
Yeah.
Compared to the other ones. So seeing that he was able to go pro in baseball and even win National League MVP is just shows how good he really was and how much growth he went through.
Yeah, and I mean, just as a person, Jackie Robinson, real quick, I know we're talking about these people and how they're great athletes. Jackie Robinson's a phenomenal all-time athlete, but I mean, they really picked him. The Dodgers organization picked Jackie Robinson, not only because he was a fantastic baseball player, but just because he had an incredible temperament. He was an incredible people person, family man, and just such a great guy. And they wanted Jackie Robinson to go down in history for a reason, because he deserved it. And he was the player and the personality to do that and just to commit that great feat. So hats off to Jackie Robinson.
Without a doubt.
So my third greatest sports athlete of all time is going to be Bullet Bob Hayes. So Bullet Bob Hayes most notably played wide receiver for those great 60s and 70s Cowboys teams, but he was the only man in the history of the world to win an Olympic gold medal and to have a Super Bowl ring, which is absolutely incredible. Hayes once held world records in the 60-yard, 100-yard, and 220-yard, and the 100-meter dash, which is just incredible for one person to hold all those records and all those individual awards. He was blazing fast. He won 2 gold medals at the Tokyo Games in 1964 and in the 100, which was in the 100-meter and the 4x100-meter relay. Funny story about him in the Olympics that year. His football coach at the time at the University of Miami just did not want him to go off to the Olympics. He wanted him to train for football and just not waste all of his energy and time on track and field for the Olympics. And Lyndon B. Johnson actually ended up calling the University of Miami, getting a hold of the football coach, and ordered Hayes to be able to take time off of the football team to not only keep him healthy, but to train for those Olympics. That's how great of an athlete he was and great of an asset he was for the Americans during the Olympics. So for the president to call your football coach, that means you're a pretty damn good athlete. But so not only was he just great in the Olympics, he held the NFL receiving touchdown record twice when he played. He was a 2-time first-team All-Pro, 1-time second-team All-Pro, and he won the 1971 Super Bowl with the Cowboys, like I said, against the Dolphins. And in that game, he scored 3 touchdowns. And, I mean, I encourage everybody to go back and watch some Bullet Bob Hayes highlights on the Cowboys. He was Roger Staubach's greatest deep threat. I know Drew Pearson was also great, but Bullet Bob Hayes was his greatest deep threat. And I mean, watching Bullet Bob Hayes is like watching a modern day Henry Ruggs work at Alabama. That's how fast, shifty, and explosive he really was. And he could also take a hit. I mean, he was no run out of bounds type receiver. I mean, he would lower his shoulder and just run past the defense. So, I mean, Bullet Bob Hayes is one of those players. He also has 7,000 all-time receiving yards, which is really incredible for a player who played the majority of their career in the 60s and early 70s. So, I mean, Bob Hayes, he really was a pioneer to that fast slot wide receiver we see so often today in the NFL, and he's just a great athlete.
Yeah, I mean, being able to be an All-Pro and win gold medals is just an incredible accomplishment. I think, like, if you're an Olympian, I think you're greatest, like this, if you're an Olympian with sprinting, I think football is that sport that if you had to, like, if the Olympics were, like, outlawed and you had to pick a sport, I think all Olympians would be able to really excel in football or soccer because it's just speed is so important. So I mean, Bob Hayes being able to be an Olympian, win gold medals, and then go to the NFL and win Super Bowls and become one of the one of the premier wide receivers of that time is just really incredible to look at.
Yeah, it's crazy with Bob Hayes too. I mean, he set all these world records and won all these gold medals while he was still in college. So he was a collegiate athlete and still setting world records. So his body and strength really wasn't even fully developed yet. I'm sure if he took time off from the Cowboys and went back to the Olympics, he would be even greater. And not to mention, Bull Bob Hayes is also in the Ring of Honor for the Cowboys. And love or hate the Cowboys, but the Cowboys Ring of Honor is one of the most prestigious Ring of Honors in all of the NFL to make. So, I mean, that's pretty significant as well.
Yeah, for sure. So for my number 3 spot, I had someone you already mentioned. I had Deion Sanders, primetime. So right out of high school, he was picked in the 6th round by the MLB, which I think looking at the MLB draft, it's 40 rounds, and a lot of athletes get picked in that draft. But I think if you're kind of like 8 to 1 in those rounds, I think it's really a really high accomplishment because the odds of those people playing in the major league is extremely high.
Yeah.
But instead of going to MLB right out of high school, he decided to enroll at Florida State. So at Florida State, he competed in football, baseball, and ran track and field. In college, his greatest accomplishment for football, in 1998, he won the Jim Thorpe Award, which Jim Thorpe, I have him high on my list. That's the best defensive back in the country.
Yep.
So that's one of the highest accomplishments you can get for a defensive player. I mean, he has blazing speed. He has one of the fast 40s ever. And I think this is one of the most insane stats I read. At FSU, he had a doubleheader one day, but also track. So he played one game in the doubleheader, then went to the track field, ran his 4x100 relay, and then played another baseball game after that. So he's just a marathon man. In 1988, he was drafted in the 30th round by the Yankees, but also was drafted by the Falcons in that year as well. He went to the Falcons. He went to the Cowboys, like you said, the 49ers. He won 2 Super Bowls in his time in the NFL. He won the 1994 Defensive Player of the Year. And then he also had some play in the major leagues as well. He played for the Yankees and Braves, like you said. And then his biggest accomplishment, I would say, is he's the only athlete, or not his biggest accomplishment, but the biggest accomplishment showing how many sports he was able to participate in, is he was the only player to play in the Super Bowl and in the World Series.
Yeah, that's incredible as well. I mean, Deion Sanders, he could do it all. I mean, that's an absolute incredible feat. That's something I don't think we'll ever see today. The thing with Deion Sanders, which is also so amazing, and I mean, looking at Bo Jackson, how great of an athlete he was, even Bo Jackson couldn't take the rigor and the grind of just right after the NFL season ends, you got 2 weeks, then baseball is going to start up in terms of spring training. So, I mean, Deion Sanders for a decade plus didn't have any vacation time, didn't have any relaxing time. He went from studying NFL defenses to studying pitching tendencies of the pitcher they're going to face the next day. So, I mean, that's absolutely incredible. I don't think we'll ever see that again, especially how NFL contracts work nowadays. I don't think we'll ever see a multi-sport athlete quite like Deion Sanders into just huge, professional sports leagues like the MLB and like the NFL. I mean, just to do all that and just not even be injured really significantly at any point in his career is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you saw someone like Kyler Murray who had the opportunity to play both football and baseball, and he had to pick one. Obviously, he wasn't able to play both like Deion was.
Yep. So, getting into both of our top twos, my number 2 greatest athlete of all time, greatest multi-sport athlete of all time, is a player, again, you already mentioned, and that's going to be Jim Brown. And kind of touching upon some of the points you did not touch upon, I mean, looking at Jim Brown's NFL career, I mean, he's the greatest Brown of all time. I know that's not saying much, but, I mean, his stats are really just incredible. These are stats where if somebody in a 16-game season puts up these stats, I mean, they're the best running back in the league. And for Jim Brown to put some of these stats up as a player with a 14-game schedule and in an era where there's really no threat to pass the football like there is today. So you had the entire defense honing in on Jim Brown every single play. game after game, play after play, and he was still able to put up ungodly numbers. I mean, he led the NFL in rushing 8 times, led the NFL in rushing touchdowns 5 times, and led the NFL in yards per game 8 times as well. And Jim Brown, I mean, some of these rushing totals are crazy. He ran for 1,500 yards in a season, 1,800 yards, 1,500 yards again. I mean, he put up 17 touchdown seasons multiple times. And to do that in a 14-game season, in some 12-game seasons, matter of fact, because the NFL were a 12-game league up until the 1961 season. So some of those stats I just read were in 12 games as well. I mean, is absolutely incredible. And like I said, there really was no threat to pass back then. The passing game really wasn't much, but he still totaled over 500 yards once in a season in terms of receiving yards. And he had 459 receiving yards in a season as well. So just to be all around just a great back, not to mention he was a great return man for the Browns, punting and kick returning. So, I mean, Jim Brown's a player, like you said, one of the greatest lacrosse players of all time. Not only that, but I mean, one of the greatest just multi-tooled NFL players of all time.
Yeah, I think just the most insane stat is just looking at how high his stats are, and then just considering that it's a 14-game season or it's a 12-game season. And I mean, just some of the running backs today aren't able to reach 15,000 yards in a season. I mean, 1,500 yards in a season. He was able to do it. It's just crazy to think about that.
Yeah, and I mean, Jim Brown held a lot of the NFL rushing records, like you said, for a very, very, very long time. So just incredible player. I know he's very outspoken now. I mean, just a great human being, Jim Brown is as well. And he's just really just an ambassador for the NFL.
Yeah. So for my number 2 spot, I had Jim Thorpe. He played, I mean, at the beginning of the 1900s, so a very long time ago. He played football, basketball, baseball, track and field, and he even did some ballroom dancing in his spare time as well. For football, a sport we both like, he helped pioneer the NFL. He was the first president of the NFL, actually. And he's also in the 1920s NFL All-Decade team, which is pretty insane. But when he was in the NFL, that was kind of it was in the twilight of his career. I think the biggest impact he made was in college football, because back then college football was a lot more popular than the NFL. Because NFL was it was in its infancy, but he went to this school called the Chirasol School, and he was able to win back-to-back national championships, and he was able to even beat the number 1 ranked Harvard one of the years. But also another great, while he was a great NFL player or football player, he's also an Olympian, and he won gold medal for the decathlon and pentathlon. So I don't know what those are made up of, but it's just he does a lot of it's like javelin, 100-meter dash. It's a lot of stuff incorporated in one.
Yeah, I actually recorded down because I was researching Jim Thorpe as well, what those two events are. So the pentathlon, it consists of fencing, shooting, swimming, riding, and cross-country running. And then a decathlon is 10 track and field events. So, I mean, that just shows how ridiculous his versatility was.
Yeah, it's not like he's just a sprinter. Like, he has to become the best in the world for a mass amount of sports. Like, it's just not one. It's a lot. Yeah. And also, he played 15 seasons in football and baseball. He finished his baseball career with a 25-2 batting average, which is just that's pretty great average for someone who played 15 years. It's just looking at the mass amount of sports he played, and he was great at all of them, is just really insane.
Yeah, and for all those reasons you just stated, I will get into my number 1 pick, which was your number 2 pick, Jim Thorpe. I mean, some of the points you didn't make. Jim Thorpe was the first Native American to ever win a gold medal for the United States, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, he's one of the most notable Native Americans in American history. I mean, like you said, they name a defensive back award in college football after Jim Thorpe. Not only was he a great defensive back for some of the teams he played on, such as the Canton Bulldogs, but he was an all-pro running back for those teams too. So, I mean, he played every single down of every single game, offense and defense, never took a rest. And this was, again, like you said, in the twilight of his athletic career in his 30s to be doing that. I mean, your brain has to be just so sharp to not only to be able to do all these really athletic feats, but to be able to fence and to shoot at an Olympic level is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my number one. So I had Bo Jackson. I think he's just, before I go into like how he was good at multiple sports, I think Bo Jackson is just plain and simple the greatest athlete of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, he has blazing speed. It's rumored he can bench 400 pounds. So someone being able to run that fast and be able to have that amount of strength is just incredible. But at Auburn, he was a football star. He was a baseball star. He was a track star as well. He won the Heisman Trophy his senior year. He was one of the only people to be a Pro Bowler in the NFL and the MLB.
Yep.
An All-Star for the MLB, not Pro Bowler. He had an insane arm for baseball, so he was able to. A lot of the highlights looking at his baseball career, he was able to throw a lot of runners out at third base from right field, which is just a crazy amount of distance. I mean, he's just an athletic freak. I know his injury with the hip that really cut his career short. We didn't see much of what he was able to do, but just the small sample size we saw just showed how good he was. I mean, you saw one of his main NFL highlights. He ran over the Boz on like the 3-yard line.
Yeah.
He took the starting job from Marcus Allen. I know Al Davis was really in love with Bo Jackson. That kind of ruined his relationship with Marcus Allen. But being able to take the starting job from one of the best running backs of all time is a great feat.
Yeah, I mean, him taking the starting running back job from Marcus Allen is kind of a parallel to really Steve Young taking the starting job from Joe Montana. That's how highly that the Raiders organization, just everybody in the NFL world thought of Bo Jackson. Like you said, I would agree with the point you just made of he is the greatest athlete of all time, plain and simple. I mean, to run a 4.12 40-yard dash time with that explosiveness is just absolutely incredible. Just his balance of explosiveness, speed, and power is just so incredible. The only reason I did knock him down on my list is because he did underachieve in both the MLB and in the NFL. I mean, he really just should have stuck to one of those sports. If he did, we wouldn't have been talking about him on this list, but he would have been a Hall of Famer in whichever sport he did choose. Really sad that his body just kind of broke down after that just catastrophic hip injury that we did see him suffer while playing in the NFL. I know he played some MLB seasons after that, but he really just was never the same. See, the only thing I would knock Bo Jackson for, again, like I kind of got into earlier, is that, I mean, he only played 4 MLB seasons with 100-plus games, and still, even then, he didn't even really come close to the 162 game mark in the MLB. And like I did say earlier, he only played 4 seasons in the NFL, never ran for more than 1,000 yards. And in fact, he only ran for over 700 yards once in a season, only scored 5 touchdowns in his highest touchdown season. So, I mean, he really just did underachieve at the MLB and the NFL level. But like you said, he was an all-star in both the MLB and he was a Pro Bowler in the NFL. So that's just absolutely fantastic. And again, he's one of the biggest what-ifs in sports history.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at he won the Heisman in college, and he was really able to perform in the college level. And to a lot of people, college is more meaningful than the NFL. So, I mean, I know you can look at it with a grain of salt that he wasn't able to perform at the major league or the NFL, but he was also able to perform college football, which is just a step above or tread below the NFL and the MLB.
Yeah, and I mean, I know Nike ran some great ad campaigns, and right toe-to-toe with Be Like Mike was Bo Knows. I mean, Bo Jackson, that famous picture of him with the shoulder pads and the baseball around his shoulders. I mean, that's how great of an athlete he was. You see him dunking in that commercial. I mean, he could play every sport. I know there's a story about Bo Jackson that he was dunking in the 7th grade. So Bo Jackson, just a fantastic athlete.
Yeah, for sure. So you want to run through your list real quick, 1 through 5?
Yeah, so real quick, my list. I'm going to give a quick honorable mention to Kyler Murray. He's my guy, quarterback for the Cardinals. Not quite as great of a multi-sport athlete as these guys are, as he's only played one professional sport. He was a great player at A&M and Oklahoma at baseball, but he is the only person ever to be a top 10 pick in 2 major sports leagues. He was 9 to the A's and number 1 to the Cardinals. So, I mean, that's nothing to take lightly. He is definitely a great athlete, and that's a huge feat to be able to pull off. I mean, he was 42-0 in his high school career in Texas, playing in the most competitive just football scenes in all of high school football. That's incredible. But my number 5 athlete is Bo Jackson. My number 4 athlete is Deion Sanders. My number 3 athlete is Bullet Bob Hayes. Number 2 would be Jim Brown, and then number 1 is Jim Thorpe.
Yeah, so going off of my list, honorable mentions, Charlie Ward, Danny Ainge, and shout out Peyton Manning played basketball in high school, so I guess he's a multi-sport athlete, right? But my number 1 is Bo Jackson. My number 2, Jim Thorpe. 3, Deion Sanders. 4, Jackie Robinson. 5, Jim Brown. So thank you everybody for watching. Tell us what your top 5 multi-sport athletes of all time are, and we'll see you in the next episode.